Ooh, like notes through the hourglass, these are the songs of our lives, yes!
Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Songs of Our Lives. I am Brad Rose. I'm a musician, a composer, a writer, the founder of Foxy Digitalis, and somebody who thinks about music and sound far more than is healthy. Each week, I invite on a guest to talk about the music and songs, specifically songs, that have basically been with them along their journey and left a mark. This week, I'm really excited. This is, I talked a couple episodes ago how I'm excited to have sort of non-musicians on, because I think I'd love to hear how music has been this really impactful thing on people's lives and the things they've done outside of the music world. Although this one has some crossover. But anyway, my guest is Tim Gormley, who is the co-founder of and former head brewer of Burial Beer Company at Asheville, North Carolina. He also is the director of their Visuals Wine program and runs the label Ceremony of Seasons. The label is how Tim and I met. He sent me a promo, like his first release on the label, I believe, or the first one that I think the first one was the first two. It was Ross Gentry and Brett Nauke. And I mean, that's coming out with some heavy hitters, at least in the Foxy Digitalis world, especially. And we just kind of got to know each other and really hit it off, and have been just stayed in touch about music stuff and different things. And so when I started, I really wanted to talk to him because if you're not familiar with Burial Beer Company, gosh, Mike, that's a mouthful. Oh God, bad pun. Anyway, I talked to him about this, but I remember when I first saw their like can designs, it was like, oh man, the people who are running this are into like metal and like psychedelic music and stuff. And then like the names of the beers and just the whole aesthetic, it is so just my vibe. And even though I don't really drink much these days, I love seeing, just like I follow him on Instagram just because I really love seeing the names and just the wine stuff. The Visuals wine labels are beautiful. And so Ceremony of Seasons was started as basically part of, or working in collaboration with the Visuals wine club. And so each of the releases, most of the releases, I don't know if it's all of them, I think it's most of them, have a wine pairing with them. It's just such the coolest thing. This like really like holistic connection and just experience. And so I knew that Tim needed to come on because there's so much to talk about here. And I wasn't wrong. Like, he has so many good stories. This is the longest episode I've ever done. Is because there's just so many good stories, and we were just having, like, for lack of a better phrase, we were like really vibing, and it just kind of it got long. But I love when that happens. And I'm really excited for people to share it. The latest Ceremony of Seasons release is Meg Mulhern's Let It Burn Through the Night. I think it is officially out on January. God, what is the Friday? This is the problem. I can never remember dates. February 2nd. I was thinking January 31st, but I didn't think it was Friday. So it is out. It's officially out on February 2nd. You can pre-order it now. It is on vinyl and digital. And yeah, it's a really good, really, really good record. I'm a big fan of Meg's stuff. But yeah, so we had a lot of fun. We recorded this on Zoom a couple of weeks ago, had some technical difficulties, but we made it through and had a great time. And I think you all will enjoy it. My guest today is a brewer, vintner, director of visuals, and the mogul behind Ceremony of Seasons record label, among many other things. It is Tim Gormley. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Brad, thank you so much for having me, man. This is such a thrill, honestly, because I've been listening to your podcast really from the beginning that you started doing podcasts, and yeah, it's kind of like super surreal to be on this side, to be actually involved. It's crazy.
It's very different being in the hot seat as like I was saying, I've done this where someone interviewed me for it, and afterwards I was like, wow, what I'm putting people through some things here.
That's why it's so good, man.
Yeah, exactly. So, so for those who aren't aware, you are one of the co-founders of Burial Beer Company and Visuals Wine.
Yes.
And Burial came first. You guys have been around for a little over. You guys had your 10-year anniversary this year.
Yep, that's right. In June.
Man, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned, like one of the things that the first exposure I ever had to Burial is it Skillet Donut Stout?
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I used to do some beer trading back in the day, and I think somebody threw one of those in as an extra, like back in the day, and immediately saw the label and was like, "Whoa, this is cool. What is this?" And then the beer was really good, but the label, like, really, the whole kind of vibe of it just stuck with me.
Right.
And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about, like, how the sort of like the name and the visual elements and even the names of the beers, because I think, like, I look at a lot of the names of the beers, I'm like, God, that'd be a great album title.
Right. I know. Yeah, our names are kind of like, they've become this almost cult like thing. It's hard. I'm not quite sure the best way to describe it, but like, there's literally these burial beer name generators that somebody that no one knows who it is. Somebody on the internet created this, and it's literally like, all right, what's your birth date and what's your, there's all these like things about you, and you connect them all, and that becomes your burial beer name. It's so amazing.
As soon as we get off this call, I'm looking up what mine will be. And maybe that'll be the name of a future, like, Charlatan album.
Yes. Oh, man, as it should. But yeah, I mean, music has always been such a huge part of my life. And, that's pretty true for my business partners as well. And I feel like I always pay a lot of attention to music. I'm the type of person that, when I find those albums that I'm obsessed with, it's like, give me all the information possible. And the big part of the reason why I love Bandcamp over a lot of the other streaming services is because there's that opportunity for the artist or the label or whatever to put all that kind of description material on there. And I kind of obsess over that. And I feel like in a lot of ways, the way that we've kind of built the aesthetic of the brewery and the way that we talk about our beers is, inherently kind of inspired by the music world. And, I kind of fell in love with metal and kind of heavier music in high school. And I grew up in the Philly area. And then in 2007, I kind of decided I wanted to get out of Philly and just kind of go on an adventure. And I ended up moving to Seattle, Washington, because it was just like, on paper, it seemed like my perfect kind of like my perfect city, great music, great beer, beautiful, surrounded by amazing nature, a lot of hiking and camping, and very progressive town. So ended up moving there, and my kind of like love for music really, I feel like, blossomed to some degree, or definitely like got a bit more intense, more important part of my life. And I discovered a ton of amazing stuff and got to see so many great shows out there. And then it was while living out there that I kind of got into the beer world as a professional, being like a longtime craft beer drinker, and, dabbled in home brewing, ended up meeting the business partners out there. My now business partners, Doug is originally from Ohio and Jess is from New York. They had lived in New Orleans for a little while during grad school. They moved to Seattle to, partially because they loved wine, actually. And partially because, they were also like intrigued by the art and music scene there.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, we met, we actually started this like beer blog together, and then we were homebrewing together, and then eventually we decided we were gonna work on opening a brewery. So we were kind of like working on a business plan, and we kind of got to that stage where it's like, all right, what's the name gonna be? And we had pitched we had this list, probably 20 some potential names long at one point, and nothing just felt quite right.
Yeah.
And then there was this moment when Jess actually went down to visit New Orleans again. And I think she was just kind of like walking around and walked past a cemetery. And for anybody that's ever been to New Orleans, the cemeteries down there are very unique because New Orleans is below sea level. So they don't have any, below ground tombs. Everything's like above ground, and these like obelisk things. They're like really, really beautiful. And so that kind of inspired her, and she thought of this name Burial as a potential name for the brewery. And she ended up pitching it to Doug and Jess, or excuse me, Doug and I, and we I of course loved it because it like kind of fit that metal aesthetic that I love. And of course, like Burial, the electronic musician was like a thing at that time. I was pretty obsessed with that guy. And so, we kind of just fell in love with it. And in a lot of ways, the name kind of represented something a little bit less kind of dark as it might initially seem. It was we were really leaning into this idea of like light versus dark. The like life and death, the cyclical nature of life. Like the New Orleans concept of the jazz funeral is just such a beautiful thing where, somebody passes away, and instead of everybody, wearing black and being extremely mournful, it's like this parade, and it's a celebration of their life. And it's kind of a really beautiful way to flip something that's kind of dark. And so, that's kind of like the philosophy that we more leaned into. But of course, the name lent itself to some really cool kind of darker imagery. And, I started to pitch all these like metal album cover illustrators and concert poster illustrators. And one of the really cool things that Jess actually introduced me to, because she has a degree in arts administration, and was always really interested in art. She fell in love with Flemish art, and a lot of the Flemish art, Hieronymus Bosch is kind of the example that I always go to because I feel like people might know him, but it's kind of religious inspired, I think, in a lot of ways, but it ends up being this very like dark and psychedelic, trippy sort of thing. And so I think some of the art that I pitched to Doug and Jess that in some ways resonated with that side, that love that they had, and kind of like wasn't just straight up like death and gore, but like had kind of like reverence of nature into it, and some of the beautiful side of it all. That was kind of the direction we wanted to go. And so I ended up pitching this guy, David Paul Seymour, who kind of I knew mostly through a lot of kind of like doom and stoner metal albums, some psychedelic rock albums, and they were really into his work. And so we reached out to him, and it ended up being incredible because he actually was an architect at the time, and he did illustration on the side. So that fact that he like understood the like business side of it all, was kind of actually unique in comparison to a lot of the other artists that we had like reached out to. And so, the relationship has been going for 10 years now. And like, his art is so tied to the Burial brand. I can't even imagine separating the two. So it's pretty cool.
I can't. I mean, it's such a distinct, like the visual element of it is so distinct and so like for me, like stuff like that just so much adds to the experience of like enjoying the beer, or and
Right.
I think I really like so my wife is an archaeologist, and so
Is it?
there's a lot of circle of light, like bones, and but like all of these things are very like thinking about death, and like it's not like a morbid thing in our house. It's like this thing. It's just part, and I think that I really love I don't know, like all of that feels so ingrained in like what you guys present. And then again, like add the names, and then I mean, you all are, like ingredients are, they're grown, like it's like things. It's like we were talking about earlier. It's like it's an agricultural product, so it's like
Right.
these things are come from the earth, and it's yeah. I mean, I think it's really like this kind of beautiful thing, and I'm sure some people are like, oh, it's just beer. It's like, no, but it's more than that. It's so much more than that.
I'm glad that you like. I'm glad that comes through, I guess I should say, because like in so many ways we are, our like more or less our like mission statement at Burial is to create immersive experiences. And so the beverages that we make are, obviously a big part of how we do that, but we do put an enormous amount of effort into the things beyond the actual liquid, the packaging, the art, the name, the description of the beer. And then, beyond that, the experience by which you have it in, like we try to really create these immersive spaces. We have several tap rooms now. We put a lot of love into like even the music that's playing at the tap room, and the core, and all that stuff. So yeah, it's like a full experience, and that very much kind of leads into what I've been doing lately on the wine side of things, which is, we call it visuals. It's like a different brand, but it's the same ownership. I make the beverages for the most part within the same walls as we make the beer, but the brand's got a little bit of a, well, actually dramatically different aesthetic to it. The labels are much more like photography based, and there's this very kind of like geometric, kind of graphic overlays on the photography. But yeah, this was kind of like, I was the head brewer for Burial for the first 5 years, and then had to kind of shift into various other roles based off of what the business kind of needed to do. And then kind of late 2020, after things settled out a little bit with COVID, and we, gained some confidence that our business would remain a business. I was kind of like given this very unique and exciting opportunity to kind of carve out my own path, like decide what role I wanted to play in Burial. And we had started this visuals brand, but no one was really kind of focused on it. And so I saw it as a really amazing opportunity to just like expand my knowledge base and learn about a different type of fermentation, and to make connections in a kind of a different subculture of the greater kind of craft beverage subculture. And yeah, one of the things that kind of kept coming up for me as I talked to winemakers that I met and was asking them, like, how do you create experiences for your customers? Like, how do you connect with them? Because it's much more rare for a winery to have a bar like breweries do. Like almost every brewery, every craft brewery in America has like a tap room, right? They have that mechanism to be, hand the beverage across the bar and talk about it. And not a lot of wineries do that. So what a lot of wineries end up doing is having these wine clubs. And a lot of times the wine clubs have like, 2 to 4 releases a year. And it's like you get a case or a half a case of wine. And that's kind of the extent of it. Of course, sometimes there'll be events surrounding it, taste, meet the winemaker, whatever. But I really was like determined to come up with, what's the like burialized version of of a wine club? And to me, it had to be much more experiential. It had to have more components to it. And in a lot of ways, I just, it's kind of, I guess, in a way, like personal to me, because I think about the ways that I like to enjoy a beverage that, that feels kind of special. And a lot of times I treat it like this ritual of sorts where, you're kind of like, all right, I want to make sure that I've got this beverage at like the perfect temperature, and I've got my favorite glass out, and I'm like, what record am I going to put on?
Right.
Maybe light a candle or something. And, yeah, just like make it a special moment where I can really literally, be in the moment and like, and enjoy it fully and take it in. And so that was kind of the gift that I was hoping to give to others, like, how do I cultivate that? How do I curate an experience that people can have on their own with our wine? And me being who I am, and being the lover of music that I am, of like, no experience that I create is going to have, not have a music element. So yeah, I had decided that I wanted to have some piece of music that goes with the experience. And of course, I could have created like a custom playlist or something like that, and that's cool. But I really wanted to celebrate Asheville as much as possible, because it's such an amazing place full of a lot of creative people. And I, through the years, I had met a lot of amazing musicians in town. We're really lucky that we have both Moog and Make Noise synthesizer companies based in Asheville, which is like super strange for such a small town. But that ends up, cultivating like a pretty incredible subculture of people making, more kind of abstract, experimental synth-based music, which is my wheelhouse. I love that stuff. So so I ended up basically reaching out to all these musicians in town. I was like, hey, I have this idea. I could be totally crazy. Feel free to say that I'm crazy. But like, would you be down to write and record a record specifically for this experience, like not only inspired by the wine that's going to come with the membership package, but also like the season. I do like seasonal releases. And I was actually like really taken aback by how much enthusiasm that concept was greeted with. Like, so many of the musicians were like, man, I love this idea. And like, honestly, I wish that I had more kind of prompts like this. Like a starting place for how I create. I mean, because I know, like, for me, like a lot of my music I make, it comes from like some idea will like pop in my head, or it's not. And so having somebody approach you and be like, here's these sort of it's like, oh yeah, I can go with this. I guess in a way it's almost like, being asked to score a film. You're scoring a wine. Yeah, exactly. So that kind of, honestly, like, that's so cool. The purpose of me starting the Ceremony of Seasons label was essentially to just facilitate this much bigger vision that I had for the wine club. And I knew I wanted to have like complete creative control over the process. And so, that's kind of where the label started. And then I guess we're only, at the time of recording this, we're less than 2 weeks away from the winter solstice, which is December 21st, which is when I'll be releasing the next one, which will be the sixth wine club release. Though technically it's my seventh musical release, because I released one cassette tape with Ross Gentry last year that was unassociated with the wine club, just because I was so excited about the piece of music, and I love Ross, and I was like, I'm putting this out, man, this is amazing. But that's kind of like that's kind of where I'm at right now, and how visuals and ceremony of seasons, and I call the wine club ritual of senses. The ceremony of seasons and the ritual of senses were kind of very purposefully like made to sound like each other.
Yeah.
Both kind of referencing that concept of like making a special moment out of the experience with the music and the wine. So
I think it's, it's funny too. I was thinking about this when you were, talking about like the sort of ritual of opening, a bottle of something. I was like, oh, that's also really similar to the ritual I have when I'm like sitting down to put on like a record, especially a record I was really like, I've been really looking forward to or something. And it's the same thing. And so that connection just makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, and I think it's really cool, like, because like the kind of music you're putting out is like right in my wheelhouse too. It's the kind of stuff I really love. But I really love that like these artists and these albums are getting exposed to an audience that they may not otherwise, like through the wine club, through people who are maybe have joined it more because their interest is more with the wine. But I imagine, there are like people who aren't exposed to the kind of music that maybe I'm obsessed with, but are like, they're really thoughtful, interesting people, and they just don't know about it because most people don't know about it. And so it's like you put it in front of them in this way. It's like they're going to think, oh, cool. Okay. I'm going to do, this is what is intended. I'm going to do that. And then, some subset of them are going to probably find something like, wow, I really like this. And now I want to know more about this. And I think that's such a like really like in this moment of where, it feels like the music industry is like getting stuff out there and bringing people in and all that. It's like very difficult. Like, I think ways like that, it's so cool. Like, it's so awesome. And,
thank you, man.
I'm very stoked about all of it.
Thank you. No, it means a lot to me. And it's been incredibly fulfilling for me. And yes, there are so many times when people in the club tell me like how much they loved the record, and it's like, I think it's almost impossible for me on some level to not be like, yeah, maybe this was a little self-serving, right? Like this is music that I am passionate about, and I'm kind of like, not forcing it upon people, but I mean, in a way, it's like, I guess I knew that maybe people would be like, what is going on here? You know what I mean? But yeah, I guess I'm the type of person I've always felt very strongly about, like, if you understand the context of, you understand the backstory of a piece of art, no matter what it is, you're going to appreciate it on such a deeper level. Sometimes, you could see a piece of art, if it's a visual art, and it just might mean absolutely nothing to you, or like seems like a child did it, right, or something like that. But then you start to learn the story and like how it connects with the broader world of art and when it happened. All those details really make it kind of solidify in your mind. Oh yeah, this is special. And I think in a way that was the kind of idea here, was like try to carve out a moment for yourself, like in this very ADD world that we live in, where there's just so much information being crammed down our throats at all times, to just try to like take a minute for yourself, sit down with this and take it in. And I think cultivating that sort of headspace hopefully makes people more like open to it. I mean, my mom, as amazing as she is, wanted to support this project of mine, and she's been in the club from the beginning, and she often says how much she loves the music, and I think that's so cool.
That's the best. Yeah. That's amazing. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Oh man. Supportive parents.
Yeah.
Before we get into the meat of the show, I also want to, all these music's obviously been a very big part of your life, and it's been various elements of music have been influential to the brewery and to visuals. Do you guys do shows at the brewery?
Oh yeah, so glad you asked that. Yeah, so from the very beginning of Burial, we had this festival that we call Burn Pile, and it's during autumn, and it's from the beginning. It's just meant to kind of celebrate the harvest season, and we've always asked the brewers that send beer to it to give us a beer that, in some way, however they see fit, kind of celebrates the harvest season. And there's always been a live music component to that. In the early days when we were small, we really focused on local and smaller regional bands. And then I'm pretty sure it was 2019 when we had basically scaled up Burn Pile Festival. We shifted it to Forestry Camp, which is our second location in Asheville, which is like this really amazing kind of almost like a campus on 2 acres. So there's a lot of outdoor space. And at that point, we started working with Jeff Whitworth, who's a booking agent in town that mostly focuses on the Gray Eagle, which is a really great venue in town. And so he was helping us book some more like bigger touring bands. And that was really where we started to kind of dabble in that. And that was an amazingly fulfilling experience too, because it was basically just, Doug, Jess, and I been like emailing Jeff, like all these bands that we love that we would, like our dream bands to play. And at times, some of those bands, came true. And that was just insane to have these bands that you love play at your place, in front of like your audience. And it was just another one of those like ways that we could kind of curate the vibes that we wanted to, the experiences that we wanted to. And then this is still like super fresh, but literally like a month and a half ago, we just opened a music venue called Eulogy, which is right next door to our original tap room in the South Slope neighborhood of Asheville. We just got really lucky that the building right next door, which used to be called Asheville Hardware, it was like more like a woodworking store, but it was a pretty large building with like a big showroom floor, a big basement, and then like a big storage unit next door to it. We were able to acquire the whole building. We put a little like another brewery in the kind of storage area. We used the basement for like our shipping area and storage, and that now it's like the green room for the venue. And then
it's awesome.
The main showroom floor became this music venue. So it's been just so surreal, honestly, being like such a music nerd for so long and to be so inspired by music for so long, and then to start dabble in like hosting bands that I really love and getting to meet them. And then now having this music venue where it's like music is legitimately part of my like professional life now too. It's totally crazy.
Living the dream.
I know, it's so true. So true. It's been so cool. So yeah, like check it out for anybody that is ever passing through Asheville. Eulogy is the name. And Brad, I got to get you out to Asheville. I got to take you to a show.
Yeah, it's been way too long since I've been to Asheville, so we will revisit that at a future date.
Yes.
Well, okay, so let's get into the meat of the show here.
Yeah.
And let's start, as we always do, by going way back past before Burial was a thing, before you ever realized maybe that you liked beer. Hopefully, I don't know. And what's the first song that you remember?
Yeah, man, I gotta tell you, I ended up initially I was kind of terrified of this question, but it ended up being the most meaningful question. The first question ended up being the most meaningful question for me. And to be honest with you, the answer that I came up with is not necessarily related to this story I'm going to tell, but I do think that it's worth telling because it ended up being very meaningful to me. So it just so happened that when you initially sent me the email with the list of questions and asked me to be a part of the podcast, my dad was visiting town, and I'm originally from the Philly area. My dad still lives in Westchester, Pennsylvania, kind of a suburb of Philadelphia. And so it's, it's like a 9-hour drive down to visit me. My younger sister, I have one sibling. My younger sister lives in Asheville as well. So, all the more reason for my dad to make that long drive a couple times a year. And, inevitably, we were like sitting at a bar at one point while he was visiting. And I brought up the fact that I was asked to do this podcast, and I was basically telling, my dad, my sister, my wife was there as well. And I was like, man, this is looking at these questions. I'm like, this is going to be so hard for me because I feel like I don't listen to music like this. I was like, I mean, of course I understand that, like, technically speaking, a song, the definition of a song is that it has lyrics, right? But I was like, I listen to so much music that doesn't have lyrics at all, that's instrumental. I listen to I'm like kind of obsessed with the idea of an album and like a full expression. I'm like, how do I even pick a song from an album that I love? It's not about the songs, and I'm just like kind of going on. And my dad literally says to me, he says, if I were you, I'd run as far away from you that you can get. And I was like, that was so funny. He said,
I'm glad you didn't listen to your dad. I'm just gonna...
I know. And it's like, I'm sure to some degree he was just trying to be supportive of me and I don't want to see you struggle through this, but but honestly, in a lot of ways, it ended up being like, I loved the challenge of it. But I guess one of the really cool things that came up as we were kind of contemplating this first question, my dad he told my sister and I this story, which I had heard parts of the story before, but there was one particular detail that really struck me that I don't recall him ever saying before. And it was basically like when we were kids, we're like 3 years apart, when we were kids, when we couldn't sleep or, just, being ornery or crying or whatever in the middle of the night, in order to kind of satiate us and get us to fall back asleep, he would put us in the car, drive us around. Of course, like the motion of being in a car is kind of soothing and put you to sleep. But he also mentioned in this particular time telling the story that he would put on this radio program when he would drive us around. And it was like really, I forget exactly the word he said, but he was like, it was very soothing, like quiet music that would help us go to sleep. And I just remember being like, holy shit, this is big. Like I am obsessed with this music, and maybe this was like this is
where it all began.
Yeah, this is where it all began. Yeah. And I remember asking my dad, I was like, do you think you would describe the music as being like ambient or new age? And he was like, oh, 100%. And I was like, oh, what is this? And then so subsequently, kind of like after my dad left and I was like marinating on this concept, I got in this text thread with my sister and my dad, and I was like, Dad, if you can do some research and like help me figure out what this show might have been, like, I would just love to know and do some more research. And both him and my sister ended up like chiming in like all these potential options. And I was, looking back on them, trying to figure out, all right, like, does the timeline match up? Because I was born in 80, so I'm guessing it must have. My sister was born in 83, so it must have been like 83 or 84 or something in that zone. And I'm pretty certain that it must have been the show called Star's End, which my research led me that it started, I think, in the late 70s, so the timing checks out. And it was a show that was on WXPN, which was the college radio station of the University of Pennsylvania. So checks out with like where I grew up. And I'm pretty sure the show is like still existing. I haven't been able to
You haven't tuned in.
Yeah, well, I haven't really been able to find like any archives of like, might have been like way back then. But yeah,
That's amazing.
that was just like a really cool thing. And then that kind of led me to think about other things that my dad played for me that kind of may have influenced how I listen now. Like I remember this record he had that was songs of the humpback whales.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, doing some research on that, it apparently was like a really big deal back in the day and like sold hundreds of thousands of copies and ended up leading to like all these save the whale movements. But it being based in field recordings.
Right.
Yeah. So that was like a really fun journey. And I also thought it was pretty funny that my sister immediately was like, I know what your answers should be. And she said two albums, which I do also recall being on like heavy rotation when we were kids. One of which is actually going to come up later in this podcast. So I can't reveal that one yet, but the one of them was this group called the Nylons, which was like this a cappella group from the 80s, like mid 80s. It's kind of cool, but also kind of nerdy as hell. But nevertheless, the way that I ended up answering this question, and I guess I should mention also that like a good amount of, or a portion of these questions, it was like I knew the answer immediately. And I ended up sticking with that answer, even though I questioned it a bunch of times. And then there was other questions where it took me quite a while to like contemplate and to settle in on an answer that I felt good about. But I have this very distinct memory of being a kid. I want to say I was maybe like 5 years old or so, and I was gifted this essentially like a breakdancing kit of some kind. So I only really remember like two details about this. It came with a cassette tape, which was like a compilation of sorts of music that I guess you should breakdance to.
Yeah.
And then it had this like fold out poster that essentially walked you through like how to do certain breakdancing moves. And I wish I could remember who gave me this gift because it sounds really cool. And I also wish I still had it or could like find it somewhere. But one of the songs that just immediately kind of protruded through to me from that tape that I could kind of hear in my head like immediately was a Herbie Hancock song, Rocket. Which is, like listening back, I hadn't really heard it in a really long time. It's a pretty cool song, but I actually ended up finding this YouTube video, and it's essentially like seems like a remix of the song, but like all the video in the music video is all like certainly from the 80s, people like breakdancing, and it's just such a cool,
that is awesome
music video. Yeah, it was really fun to kind of think back on that, and yeah, for whatever reason, that was one that I thought of first.
It's such a banger.
Yeah, right?
It is. I mean, it is so, and yeah, and Herbie Hancock is just he can do everything. I mean, just like listening to his, like, just jump into anything, like different points of his career, and it's one of those things where it can be hard to believe it's like, oh, this is the same person, right? But like if you listen like really closely, like you can kind of hear, it's like, oh yeah, that is maybe like a riff or whatever he would play, like, right. But it's amazing to me. I'm always so like blown away by artists who can just kind of be chameleons like that and just kind of go into different worlds and not just, it's like he would go into different worlds and then just like own it. Be like, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be like the best person who does it. And, yeah, and a breakdancing kit sounds cool as hell.
I know, right?
It's
cool. And it's actually kind of amazing too. I remember, I basically told my dad, like, I think I'm going to go with this answer. And I remember my dad just being like, "Oh man, that's a good one. I remember I had that record." Like, oh man, that's rad.
That's
I
really
don't
cool.
remember him having that at all.
Yeah, my dad didn't have any Herbie Hancock records, unfortunately. Well, that's a hell of a place to start,
Right?
Like new age radio stations and
Right.
Herbie Hancock. God, explains a lot. I
Yeah,
think.
right. I know. It really does. It's crazy.
Well, on a completely different tangent, what's a song that either makes you cry or makes you feel that feeling? You know, whatever that feeling is, but it makes you feel like you're gonna cry.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I this is another question where I did kind of know the answer immediately though, and I ended up sticking with it. But I definitely considered quite a few other options, which I think also with this exercise, it's like a lot of my answers could be very interchangeable with other answers.
Sure.
But yeah, I wouldn't necessarily identify with being a crier, but music above and beyond almost anything else, like does kind of bring emotions out of me and kind of make me well up at times. And honestly, most of the time it's not because of the actual like content of the music or like lyrical message, but it's just kind of like that deep feeling of like almost like goosebumps, like to the next level. Like it's just so powerful. Most of the time it comes when I'm listening to music like extremely loudly. That's always important too. But
Yes.
yeah, the one that really came through that I had to pick, and again, it was like the first one I thought of was Sawdust and Diamonds by Joanna Newsom. And man, I think as I've thought back on this, I was kind of reminded that so this is off the album Ease, I want to say. I think I'm saying that correct.
I think so.
Yeah. The album prior to that one, Milk-Eyed Mender, I believe it was. That album I just remember being so obsessed with when it initially came out, and it just so happened to be kind of coinciding with this like pretty hard breakup that I was going through with like my kind of long time like college girlfriend. It was the first girlfriend that I ever actually like lived with after college. And so it was like I think that I associated in a lot of ways Joanna Newsom's music with this kind of heartache. And then, of course, there are moments in Joanna Newsom's music that it's like elation, but
right,
it is also extremely sad, emotional music. And actually, I was listening back to Milk-Eyed Mender not that long ago, and I actually had to turn it off because I just kept thinking about like almost unrelated sad shit. Like it was making me so sad.
There's some songs on there that are just like straight knives through the heart.
Oh my God.
Like,
unbelievable.
My pick for this question, like I was interviewed by my friend Nina Dante, which it's only on Patreon. I don't know. It may go out on the main feed sometime, but my pick was Joanna Newsom song from Milk-Eyed Mender.
Oh man, that's so crazy. Yeah.
And even like when I was talking about it on an episode, I was like, oh my God, I might start crying right
For real, yeah. Yeah, and I just remember because I was so obsessed with Milk-Eyed Mender when Ease came out, I was incredibly excited for it. I was, eagerly anticipating it. I remember I bought it on vinyl, and I definitely remember like taking the time to be like, all right, like I'm getting into this. I'm going to listen to this album like all the way through. I'm going to really pay attention to it. And man, I just remember being so struck by the song structures in that album are quite a bit different. I feel like they're very meandering, and they're quite long, and they don't really repeat very often. And obviously like it's very poetic, it's like the lyrics are such a critical part in the way that it is. And, to I don't really listen to lyrics generally. Like so much of the music I listen to is instrumental, and even music that I love that isn't instrumental, like the lyrics are kind of the last thing I think about. And man, I honestly like quite rarely like look up the lyrics. I know that it's so different from the way so many people listen to music. My wife is so like lyric driven, like it's quite interesting to me. But anyway, I just remember sitting and like reading through the lyrics as I listened, because they just seemed like such a critical part of the experience. And I remember when, for whatever reason, when Sawdust and Diamonds came on, I just like lost it and was like totally bawling, you know. And again, like it could have been any of the songs, I guess, but there was something about the way that song kind of like, I think kind of like a crescendo near the end of the song where it's just like, oh my God. And then listening to it subsequent times, I was struck, like, you know, again by that same song. And so that was kind of what solidified it in my head as being like, this is my crying song.
Yeah. whenever you needed a good cry, just put on Sawdust. And I mean, Joanna Newsom, I don't know. There are a few artists that I feel like get like just the emotion out of me that she does. And like you said, and a lot of her music is like there's some of it's very joyous and very like it runs the gamut, and she's just she's incredible.
I thought it was pretty interesting that she came up in the Patrick Shiroshi episode as well. That's been a cool thing about this show, is because you really haven't had that many episodes, but the same artists do kind of pop up from time to time, and it's kind of amazing to see that, like, all these people dive really deep into music, but there's certain things, artists that you just can't deny their power, you know?
Yeah. Joanna Newsom is definitely one of those. And as I said on that episode with Patrick, my dream for 2024 is that we get a new album.
Yes. For real.
Well, on the flip side of that, what's a song that always puts you in a better mood?
And so this question actually ended up being probably the one where I had the most potential answers, because I feel like so much of the way I listen to music, so much of how I research music is, you know, in a lot of ways, I kind of just think of music as being this like drug, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how else to put it. I mean, it's just it regulates my mood in so many ways, or puts me in the mood I want to be. I mean, I've often been asked, like, how do you organize your records, you know? And my answer is I do it by like mood. Honestly, it's like, it's either the mood that I am in and want to stay in, or it's a mood that I am not in, but I want to be in. So I go to that shelf of the record shelf. But I think that, like, I think I probably could have answered this question like maybe most people would, like some song that's very like joyous and like, you know, kind of poppy and like just makes you want to dance or makes you smile. And I honestly strongly considered answering this with a Billy Ocean song, Caribbean Queen, which that's often my kind of go-to if I'm like hanging with a bunch of people and we're, you know, drinking or smoking or whatever, and it's I'm like, can I control the music for a minute? You put that song on and everybody is loving life. But I ended up deciding I'd rather kind of answer it with more of the kind of like a psychedelic kind of like vibey headspace. And honestly, that's the music that I would say I most love and I most look for. And so I probably could have gone to like the top left two shelves in my record collection and picked out any one of them, and it could have been the answer. But the one I went with was John Porras. This is another one of those ones where I wish I could just tell you, or maybe I just will, because why not? But I wish I could just tell you the album and not like a specific song, because picking a specific song just feels kind of pointless to me on that.
Sure.
It's from Voices of the Air. And yeah, that album just kind of through and through, it gets me every time I hear it. I definitely distinctly remember the day I got that record in the mail and I put it on and I turned it up really loud, and I also cried a lot while I listened to that one. There's something about the way that this type of music just like it's like it resonates my whole body. It's like it changes the frequency of the water in my body to be like zen.
Oh man, I love yeah. I think that's such a good, because something I think about a lot is the physical effect that music and sound has on our bodies. Because sound are waves, and they literally affect our body. And this music is, I love that description, because there's a I don't know, there's this really sort of pure catharsis buried into these his music is very the movements, and so it's very subtle, but those subtle movements, it's you think of a ripple, because it's those subtle movements just send out these huge sort of feelings of, it's like if this music made me cry, it'd be a happy appreciate the world is beautiful cry.
Yeah, and there's something about this. I mean, I have been obsessed with John Porras and Evan Caminiti, who are the duo behind Barn Owl, a Bay Area kind of drone project.
I have a long history with those guys. Yeah, good history.
Man, when I first discovered Barn Owl, I was so obsessed, and I feel really lucky I got to see them play sometime in Portland. And I've been following, their solo careers, and I love pretty much everything that they've put out. There's just something about this particular album where it just, to me, it almost feels as though you're in the room with John, just like with a bank of synthesizers and a guitar and a bunch of effects pedals, just kind of creating these vibes and loops and stuff live right there, in the moment. It's just flowing out of him. And it just feels so good. It's just I wish I could be a fly on the wall for all those moments that he didn't record. You know what I mean?
Right. Oh my God. Yeah, no, I totally feel that. And I brought them here in 2008 or something, and played to 6 people. And it was one of the best shows I've ever seen. Oh my God, it was incredible. I'll have to send you. So when they were here, we recorded a record. It was them and my wife and I. We made a record as our band name was Hanging Thief, and I put it out on tape on my old label 100 years ago. But I listened to it, I don't know, a couple months ago. I was like, man, this still rules. It's 2 30-minute drones. But I love those guys. Speaking in Barn Owl reunion, that's the reunion the world needs.
I know, and it's been crazy because I follow I guess Evan Caminiti a little bit more closely on Instagram, and it looks like he's really into tattooing, and I get the sense that he's kind of focused on that, and maybe music is less of a thing for him these days, which is, I'm very happy for him.
Right.
But it's very sad for me.
Right.
And then I feel John's more recent album, I think he had a kid recently, and it felt in a lot of ways like this, beautiful kind of nursery rhyme. That's not the right word for it, but this I
know what you mean.
It was made for his baby, and really compelling and beautiful stuff. But I don't know, I just get the sense that music is less of a priority for both of them right now.
Yeah, and and it's one of those things too where I can imagine, they've moved on from Barn. It's like we're done with Barn Owl, guy. Like but man, when it comes to like that kind of whatever that strain of like experimental music was, Barn Owl was as good as it got.
Agreed.
Oh man. Well, speaking of as good as it gets, Tim,
yes.
what is objectively
yes,
the best song of all time?
We're critical word there. Yeah, man. Obviously, this is a tough one, and I think that I could have very much interchanged my answer with like, what is my favorite song?
Right, for sure.
I don't, not being a musician myself, I don't know that I could really answer this in any sort of like objective way.
Nobody can.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But a song that I have been saying to friends and family for as long as I can remember, that is perhaps, my favorite song or one of the best songs I've ever heard, is I Put a Spell on You. And honestly, the one that I'm probably most, so this is a song that's been recorded by a lot of artists. And I think there's the three that I know the best. I'm sure there's more than that. Are the Nina Simone version, which is amazing. There's, I think, Screamin' Jay Hawkins is one who's like credited with writing the song, and that song is also incredible. But it's actually the Creedence Clearwater Revival version that I am kind of most obsessed with. And I think that like all three of those, like kind of all three of the vocalists of those projects have like very distinct,
oh my God,
very striking vocals.
Yeah.
And so they're all amazing in their own right. But there's something about that Creedence version. I think if I had to put a finger on it, it's kind of like the structure of the song and like the jam middle section of the song, which I feel like so oftentimes for me to have a song that I like get really excited about, it needs to have some sort of a like jam to it, or like a crescendo of some kind,
right?
Like a build. And I understand that there was projects that were like predecessors to Creedence, but I also think it's quite remarkable that like this is the very first song on the very first record that Creedence put out, and it just like from the moment it starts, it's like a head explosion for me.
Yeah, and it kind of tells you what Creedence is all about. Like for their whole career, it's like, here, this is us.
Yeah,
like
totally. And I just love that. Like the other two versions, I think are around like 2.5 minutes long or something. It's a kind of a short song, but the Creedence version is like 4.5 minutes long. And I just love how it starts off with a kind of a more traditional song structure, and you get the kind of like the chorus of the song in there, but then like only a minute in, then they're like jamming for several minutes. And there's like, I mean, the guitar solo rips, and I feel like the drums during the solo have this like really interesting reverb to them, and it's like trippy, and it's like, I don't know, it makes me really happy.
Yeah. No, I think all the versions are great, and if I like, someone's like, you can only pick one, I would probably pick Nina Simone's, right? But because like that one to me, it's like she's like just like staring daggers through you, and it's kind of unhinged and a little like in the best way. But they're like the Creedence one, like you said, like after a minute when it kicks in, it's like they take you out in the woods and you're like around a campfire, like conjuring spirits and like casting spells or something, and it's this like otherworldly sort of freak out.
Yes.
And I love that too. And I don't even think I realized until you said that this was the first song on their first record. Right. That's wild. That's a pretty incredible thing to do.
Yeah, no, for real. I do think, I mean, you use some good adjectives there, because I think with the name, I put a spell on you, like it conjures this kind of, you know, like witchcraftery sort of vibe. And all three of those songs do in their own way kind of fit on that. And to me, being somebody that loves kind of darker music, I don't know, it has that dark edge to it that I resonate with. And like the Nina Simone song also kind of has like almost like a saxophone solo, which is incredible. Just great. I like amazing.
Yeah, and what a song too, because it's like, you have like, and all three of those versions are these super well known, like, you know, I mean, like, but they all have so much like their own thing. Like it's the same song, but they're all different songs. And like that to me is like, oh, that's the sign. This is just a great song. But man, my head's still going like, wow, that's the first thing you wanted to tell people. Right. Like that's okay. I respect the hell out of that.
Yes. Started off strong.
Yeah. Well, speaking of starting off strong and then maybe not finishing so strong, what's a song you used to love, but now you listen to it and you're like, no, I don't think so. Not for me anymore.
Right. Yeah. So this one, I feel like I could have had so many answers. It's funny, man. Like I really respect people that will tell you that the music that they listen to as a kid or in high school or whatever, like, you know, they don't want to put it in a box, or like it wasn't for them, or like they don't want to like shit on it. But like so much of the music that I loved as a kid, when I listen to now, I'm like, what was I thinking? And probably the thing that is the easiest to kind of make fun of is I was pretty obsessed with new metal in high school years. I actually remember, so my sister, even though she's 3 years younger than me, she had this friend group at one point that was really into music. And so they were introducing her stuff, and then she was introducing me to stuff. And it was a lot of pretty like under the radar stuff that I ended up really loving. And I remember them being obsessed with like the first Korn album. And this was like before Korn was popular.
Yeah.
And I was pretty amazed by it. I ended up like, you know, I had like all of their albums for a small time there. But and then, you know, I loved like Slipknot and Fear Factory. And I remember like my sister and I used to go, there's this band called Coal Chamber, and we probably saw them every time they ever came into Philly. We were obsessed with them. They're all like pretty embarrassing at this point. But the one I ended up picking was a System of a Down song, which again, I was like really into that band at a period of time. I remember, I mean, I've told the story multiple times in my life of how I like got to meet the band and like,
oh man,
get their signature and stuff. I thought it was so fucking cool. And I remember if you look at like their first album, the album cover is like basically just like this hand. And like, I remember having a t-shirt that was that hand, and it was like way oversized and like such a goofy t-shirt. Again, like, I just look back at these memories. I'm like pretty embarrassed by it, honestly. But yeah, one of the things I can say about System of a Down, though, that I think undeniably kind of made them so unique and that I connected with was, you know, they had that, they were kind of like, I think they're like from Armenia or something like that. And so they had,
I had no idea.
They had infused this kind of like, I don't know, almost like a Middle Eastern, I don't even know what the right word is, but there was this thing about their sound that was
like weird. Maybe they were using like different scales or something. They're more like Eastern European.
Like, just weird enough that it was like, what is going on here? This is special, you know? And I ended up picking the song Sugar, which is on the first album. And I think it might have been a single or something. I definitely remember singing that song like very loudly at the shows. But when you listen back to it now, it's just like the goofiest song. It's so weird.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know.
I don't get the appeal of this stuff. Like,
Right.
I mean, don't get me wrong. There was plenty of terrible thing. Like, I think back to, I'm like, there is stuff that I was into when I was younger that I'm still, I will stand by. But there's plenty of stuff that no, not at all. And so I'm not like trying to be like, I'd be on a high horse here, but yeah, like the new metal thing, I never got it. And so I was listening to this and I was just like, yep, still don't get it.
Yeah, I know. It's for the best, man. It's for the best that you stayed away from that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can, but it had its moment. Like it was,
sure. I don't know.
I think,
have you ever seen that documentary about Lollapalooza? I want to say it was like 94 or whatever, when like shit just totally hit the fan. And
99. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
When like the people, there was all the mud and they were throwing I watched that documentary. I guess the year, I don't know, whenever it came out, like last year, could have been 3-4 years ago. I don't know. What the fuck is time?
Felt like that was like the heyday of new. Yeah. And there's so many of those.
Because I remember the section of that documentary where they were talking about Limp Bizkit and how like that like just fucking lit the like that was the moment where it all went to hell.
Exactly. Yeah. It was such a big part of the narrative of the documentary, because it was like those new metal bands were the bands that just caused everybody to like lose their shit, and that's when it really went for real.
God, all the more reason to anyway. Well, on the sort of as a tangential, maybe 45-degree angle, what's a song that people don't like, people hate it, but you don't care, you love it?
Yeah, this one is kind of a little bit more of like a personal story for me. And it's a story that my wife and I have actually told multiple times, because it very much involves my wife. And, I love my wife so much, but we have very different music tastes, very, very different. And, we have some crossover,
sure,
like anybody does, but a lot of what I listen to, she just doesn't get and often makes fun of me for. But there was this moment, and I remember when Pharmakon kind of first started like being in the news. I think Sacred Bones put out one for records, and it was kind of like loosely in my peripherals, and I think I probably listened to it at some point and was like, okay, like, I'm kind of past my like harsh noise days, and I had kind of like written it off, I guess you could say. But then years later, I think I must have been listening to a podcast or something, and something inspired me to, I guess there was some talk about like how her live shows were kind of notoriously special. And so I was like, all right, I got to give this a second chance. And so I remember this moment when I was sitting in my dining room and my wife was in the kitchen. They're kind of like adjacent rooms. And my wife often works in the kitchen. She does she's an artist and woodworker. And she was working in the kitchen, and I was on my laptop in the dining room, and I pulled up this like YouTube video of a live show from Pharmakon. And I was kind of enamored by it, I was like, wow, this is like super compelling. And she was like beating on like big sheets of metal, and like running around the room screaming like crazy. And I thought it was so cool actually in that moment. And my wife is, listening to this in the other room, and she like loses her shit. She's like, what are you listening to? Like, she literally lost it. And that's not, if you know her personality, that is not her, like she just flipped. And she has, like I said, like told that story so many times. And anytime something comes up that where she like wants to like note some music that I like to somebody to kind of like make fun of me for it, it's always Pharmakon.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So,
it's so intense.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It is. Yeah. Like I remember when it came out and I feel like it just like kind of cracked people's heads open. And I never got to see her live, like in person, but I've watched some of the YouTube stuff and it's man.
Yeah. It's a lot, but yeah, it's not a thing that I would like listen to.
Yeah.
Stream or whatever on a regular basis. But yeah, the track I ended up picking was called Crawling on Bruised Knees, which I feel like I picked that one specifically because I feel like it's kind of one of the most approachable of her songs.
Which is hilarious. Yeah. But yeah. I feel like that song too, it feels like being in a war zone or something. Like the way the like oscillators feel like warplanes going around then like her oh God,
it's still intense for sure.
It's so intense. Yeah, I wonder. It's been a while since I feel like she hasn't had a record out in a long time. I don't know what's going on there. I don't know. And the record the cover for that album.
Oh my God, with
the maggots. Oh my God.
All of her record covers are also like equally as insane.
Yeah, it's bananas. Well, this is about as unrelated to Pharmakon as we could get, but I hope if Pharmakon had been your answer to this question, I would be really, really freaked out.
Yes. Just end the podcast immediately.
Yeah, I'd be like, all right, thank you, good night. Yeah. But what's the most romantic song?
Yeah, nice. Well, this was one that I felt like I had to like talk to my wife about because I wasn't really sure. And actually, I think again to reference Patrick Shiroshi, which I love him by the way, and I've gotten to hang with him a little bit. I think he said like Boyz II Men song, which I loved that answer because being like a Philly guy, like Boyz II Men was always important to me. And actually, some Boyz II Men songs have been like my karaoke song at times. But yeah, when my wife was actually the one that helped me come up with this answer, and I thought it was actually like a really beautiful answer, and it does very much relate to the time when we were kind of first getting together, and we actually had like a fairly tumultuous beginning to our relationship, and I was listening to this album pretty regularly around the time, and really loved it. So Leon Bridges is the artist. And I ended up picking the song Better Man, which it felt, I think in a lot of ways, to call that a romantic song could be a little bit confusing because it's really kind of about like him trying to, get back with somebody that he lost. But I could really relate to that because, like I said, like my wife and I were kind of on and off again there early on. And there was definitely a time when I was listening to this that I was like trying to get her back. So yeah, I always really resonated with that. There's a line in that song. It's like, I thirst for you, girl, baby, I'm running to your well. And I always loved such like a cool way to think about the concept. And actually, another kind of cool part of the story was that there was this, my wife, Annalise, she was also really into this album, and she's super close with her sister, Heidi, and I think Heidi really loved the album as well. And so one night they were kind of like, I think they were probably a little drunk, and they had this great idea to like buy tickets to see Leon Bridges on this tour. And so they bought tickets and they were all excited. And then after they sobered up, they realized that they actually bought tickets to a show in New Orleans. Which we were living in Asheville at the time. And so they were like, oh shit, whoops. And so then I was like, well, we should still go to it. Like to be on bridges in New Orleans would be amazing.
Yeah.
And I had actually never been to. He was playing at Tipitina's, which is kind of like a legendary venue. And so my wife and I ended up like taking a road trip and like camping along the way and going to the show, and it was an amazing show. And like I remember his like mom was there.
Oh my God.
Like it was a very emotional show for him. So yeah, that was beautiful. Just a great song and a great record.
Yeah. And I just like, I love there some of the lines in the song, just the sentiment of it is, I think it's really romantic. Like, and like, I would swim the Mississippi for it's like, or what? Oh my God. It's just like, yeah. Well, one of the things that always like, it blows me away that this is like a contemporary song.
Right. The whole album, like it sounds like it's from the 50s or something.
Yeah. You could have told me that this was some lost 50s album that somebody unearthed and I would have ate it up.
Yeah.
Like, it's so good.
That was definitely why I just remember being so struck by it and like loved it. Still do, and still can basically sing like every word of that.
That's awesome. Okay, well, what's a song that changed your perspective on an artist for better or for worse?
So this one I would say my answer ended up being a little bit self-serving on this one because I was kind of desperate to talk about this artist because he's kind of like probably my current favorite musician.
Okay. Love it.
And so this is definitely not like your rags to riches kind of like, this is much more like riches to like even more riches.
To like, oh, this is great, to like, oh, this is like the best shit in the world.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's Richard Skelton is the musician. And I remember when I first discovered Richard Skelton, it was when he put out this album called Landings, which I think came out in 2011. And it's when that album first came out, I was like super obsessed with it. It was probably like my most listened to album of that year. I remember just putting it on kind of in the background of so many like life experiences I had around then. But in some ways that album is, I would say if you had to categorize it, it's kind of like modern classical or whatever. And that's not really a genre that I typically seek out. I'm not even sure like why it ended up being on my radar. And so I think that I, for whatever reason, had kind of like compartmentalized Richard Skelton or put him in a box, if you will, and just kind of honestly just like didn't pay that much attention to his like subsequent work. And then in 2020, Richard Skelton put out a solo album on his own. Well, this will become relevant later, but it was again like under his own name, but it was on this label called Phantom Limb that I really love and that I follow, and I try to listen to like everything they put out. So this was because it was on that label. I was like, oh, okay, like I gotta hear this. And when I heard that the album, I think it's called These Charms May Be Sung Over a Wound. It was just so different from what I thought Richard Skelton was based on endings. And it was so much more that kind of like drone, kind of, like dark, ambient, experimental, like synthy music that I, most love and most like attracted to. And that album, was definitely one of my favorite albums of that year. I really, really loved it. And then he ended up actually putting out an album this year, which is kind of in the same vein as that album, though I feel like it kind of in some ways integrates some of the stringed instruments that he was kind of most working with in his more previous work. But I should mention that, so Ross Gentry, who I mentioned earlier in this podcast, who I've released a couple records with who lives in Asheville, a great friend and an amazing musician. He actually introduced me to this other project that Richard Skelton has called the Inward Circles, which for whatever reason I didn't even know existed. And then when I like look back on, I was listening through that whole catalog, I realized that he was putting out music kind of in this vein of droney music, far earlier than 2020. I was just like not privy to it. But yeah, like as I've gone back through those the Inward Circle albums, and again, like the album that he put out this year, I think it's called like Soleno Desti or something like that. And that These Charms album. I mean, it's just like, it just moves me so much. It's like the perfect music that I'm seeking all the time.
Yeah, I have another artist I have a long history with. I actually remember back at Foxy Digitalis, like early days, 2005 maybe. I didn't know him. I just got a CDR in the mail of, I think it was the first Carousel album.
Okay.
Is like a promo, and I was just like, what is this? And then
yeah,
loved it. And just I feel like his work, like there's a lot of music that exists sort of in this general sonic landscape, but none of it, or very little of it, has the power that his does to me.
Yeah.
I just think like the song you picked, Against Bite and Rend of Snake, like just makes the hairs on my neck stand on it. Like it is,
oh my God. Yeah.
like it just, like he has this way, like he builds all this tension, and it's like very subtle, and then it never goes away. It's like he builds it, and then it's like he walks off,
right?
And you have to leaves you to deal with it or something.
Yeah, dude, I know there's a song on his album that he put out this year under his own name called Faint Ray Systems. And I don't know if you may have heard it, but maybe didn't like really hear it, but I would strongly urge you to put that on like really loud, or like with headphones or something, because it's kind of a slow build, but there's like this like really textural, bassy like drone that like starts building and building, and it's the ultimate. I mean, I've definitely cried multiple times listening to that song really loud. Like it's just so powerful.
I've listened to that album a couple times, but I need to, I want to get, he and I have been emailing about getting him on the other, like the Foxy Digitalis podcast, to talk about the record.
Yes.
And things keep happening, and we haven't made it happen yet, but we will.
Yeah. Really hope that happens. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah. I just think he, like, over the last almost 20 years, his body of work is unbelievable to me. And like full disclosure, I put out a record of his in like 2011, I think. And Landings was on Type Records, which is a label that one of my absolute favorite people and somebody who changed my life ran. Right. So I have but I totally know what you mean. Like his music, I'm sure I had a moment with his music. I'd have to think about it to pinpoint it, where it was like, oh yeah, this is really good, to like, oh wait, this is a whole lot more than that.
yes, for real. I know I love that. This is kind of my moment, because I know obviously like one of the things I love so much about what you do and what you bring to the world through your writing and podcasts is that like curation piece, and like, I'm sure that your audience is very knowledgeable about this world of music, but just in case anybody, please listen to Richard Skelton. It will change your life.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things I mentioned this to you when we were emailing it, that I wanted to do with this podcast, is have people on who aren't necessarily like in this music world. Like, I mean, obviously you have the label and stuff, but like to bring in an audience, this goes back to what I was saying about like, if you put stuff in front of people, like just because they're not familiar with it, like it will, like Richard Skelton is a perfect example. Like people who don't listen to like experimental music, whatever, like you put this in front of somebody, a lot of them are going to be blown away by it. So, so hopefully there will be people listening to this who are fans of like, you know, the beer and the wine, and they'll be like, oh, okay, I'm going to go check out Richard Skelton. So,
Right, I hope so.
well, you've said a couple, you know, that lyrics aren't the thing that you know, you aren't a lyrics person.
Right.
Let's just
Totally.
put it that way.
Yeah.
But do you have some favorite lyrics, or what are your favorite lyrics if you had to choose?
Right. Yeah. So
and you have to choose.
this one, I must admit, I cheated on this one.
Okay.
So I ended up picking a Cocteau Twins song, and I do have a little bit of a background on, you know, why I picked this. I'm just obsessed with Cocteau Twins.
Yeah.
Always have been. I think that Liz Fraser is, you know, undeniably one of my top, you know, 5 vocalists of all time. You know, I can credit them so much with my love for shoegaze music, which I still put a lot of energy into kind of discovering that, you know, modern versions of that now.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually had this really incredible moment. This is slightly embarrassing to tell the story, but whatever. I was in Portland, Oregon with my business partner, Doug. It was just the two of us. We were just like bouncing around town. You know, we were visiting breweries. We got an amazing meal. You know, it was just, I feel like there was some sort of reason why the two of us did this, but it was just like a go out of town. We were living in Seattle at the time, just like let loose, drink some good beer, eat some good food. And so we ended up going to a strip club later that night, which, if you've ever been to Portland, the strip clubs there are exceptional. You know, I get that some people might have, you know, a thing for strip, and that's fine. I get it, you know, but the strip clubs there are special. They really are. They're amazing. And so I think Doug and I had both like taken an edible, and we're sitting at the bar in the strip club, and this Cocteau Twins song comes on that one of the girls was dancing to, and we were just like, we were really feeling the edible at the time, and the whole experience was just, when this Cocteau Twins song was on, it was really loud, and we were both like grabbing each other, like, this is the best song ever written. And you know, obviously it's one of those things where like the best beer you ever have, the best song you know, so many things that you feel like are the best are tied to like a bigger experience, right?
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, at that time, Doug was really not like, he knew that Cocteau Twins existed, but he had never really like dove in. So that moment caused him to dive in, and like, so we bonded a lot subsequently over that band. And then there was a period of time when we were, you know, our like naming conventions of beers has really kind of evolved through the years into what it is now. But there was this period of time where we're actually like naming beers after Cocteau Twins songs, or in some cases lyrics. And it was always really cool when people would be like, yo, that's a Cocteau Twins song.
That's awesome.
Like, you know, we would kind of bond with some of our, like, customers over it. So there was this period of time where I was like, even though, like I said, I'm not really like a lyric guy, I was really just combing through the entire Cocteau Twins catalog, like trying to find something that would work for a beer name. And honestly, there's not a lot there.
Yeah.
I mean, if you read their lyrics, they're pretty minimal, you know. So I guess when I say that I cheated here, to me, it's kind of like, it's, you know, and obviously Liz Fraser is like somewhat famously like sings in this way that it's kind of impossible to tell what she's saying.
Right.
There's been like, there's been this lore that it's like made up language or something like that.
Right.
So it's really just kind of about like the way the lyrics are presented, the way that she sings them, the passion that comes through. And I picked a song called Seekers Who Are Lovers, which part of the reason why I picked that song is because that's like one of the best song titles that Cocktail Twins has ever had. Just an amazing song title in general. But there's actually this like live on the BBC thing that the Cocktail Twins put out. It's like a double album. And if I remember correctly, this is the first song on the second disc. And honestly, because the song is off of like their last album, it was one that I kind of was a little bit less familiar with. And there's something about that live version and the passion that she sings with, it just like, it kind of became one of my favorite songs of theirs. And it's like specifically that live version is so much better than the studio version. And there is like
totally
YouTube videos of it. It's just a really powerful, beautiful song.
Yeah, that's so good. What are some beer names that were named after Cocktail Twin songs?
Oh man,
can you remember any off the top of your head?
Gosh, I would probably have to look back. But yeah, let me look.
Yeah.
Nothing that I can. I mean, I'm really bad at remembering songs.
Well, and I'm sure there's a million beer names to remember too.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I think that it's very possible to use cherry colored funk because that's like, gosh, you can relate that to beer really easily.
Right.
I think we might have used Frou Foxes and Midsummer Fires, which also
nice.
Kind of feels like it would be a beer name for us.
And if it's not, it should be.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. Well, what is the song that you have or you can listen to the most?
Yeah, so this was one that, again, like my kind of was inspired slightly by discussions I had with my wife, and she immediately was like, "Oh yeah, I know your answer for that one." And so clearly it's a song that I listen to a lot. But back in 2020, this band called Deserta put out an album called Black Aura, My Son. And the guy, it was basically like a bedroom project of this guy, Matt Doty, who played in a band called Saxon Shore, which was a band that I really loved back in my kind of like early college or like college years into like post college, where I was listening to a ton of post rock. And I know they had some tie to Philly. I remember, I think they might have been out on like Burnt Toast Records or something, which was kind of in the Philly area, if I remember correctly. But anyway, Black Aura, My Son by Deserta. Yeah, it's just this really incredible shoegazy project, and I was just super obsessed with that album when it first came out. And there's a song called Hide on that album that, for whatever reason, that one stands out the most to me on that album. It just has such a incredible kind of like opening sequence, crescendo, like has that huge build that you love in like a shoegaze song. And actually, it kind of, my love for that band had really solidified the following year when I had like basically reached out to Matt through social media, and I was like, hey, we put on this Burn Pile Fest, which I mentioned earlier. We put on this big festival every fall, and we've been trying to get some touring bands, and like I would be totally over the moon if you would play that fest because I'm just obsessed with your music. And he was like super into it. And
that's awesome.
He came out, and he came out like to our pre-party the day before, and I got to meet the band that he was kind of touring with, and really incredible person. And he ended up putting out another album like that year, if I remember correctly, that was also great. So yeah, that's just one that I reapproach pretty regularly, apparently, according to my
According
wife.
to your one.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something I hadn't heard, and it's great. I feel like there's the thing that really stuck out to me is like there's like a lot going on, but it never feels like there's a lot going on. Like there's and yeah, like there's a part like when that's just like the distorted guitar comes in and it's kind of got this sort of like shreddy texture to it. I don't know, but it's just damn. Like it's just like once that part, when that happens, I'm like, okay, you got me.
Right. I know. Yeah. It's like just honestly right now dawning on me that I remember one of the reasons why I loved that album so much. Like I said, it came out in 2020. So it was kind of like COVID lockdown year. And there was something about the way that album was recorded. I think it's kind of like this really low end, like synthy bass that he uses. It's just kind of like this rumble that's happening. That when you listen to it really loud, it feels, it's like there's something about it that it feels almost like a live recording. Like it felt to me at that time like the closest thing that I had really been able to get to a live show, because I missed live shows so much at that time. That was definitely a big part of why I just became like extra obsessed with that album.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's great. Well, what's the last song that you completely fell in love with?
Yeah, so this is one that I would say is probably my favorite, or amongst my favorite tracks of this year. One thing that I haven't really, I guess, mentioned that much is that I probably, like you or like many kind of music writers, though I'm not a music writer, but I'm very obsessed with contemporary music, and I really have been for a long time now. I kind of in some ways use my like personal Instagram as almost like a mini blog, sharing the music that I'm loving. And in the last couple of years, I've been like kind of creating my own, personal like albums of the year list. So I pretty obsessively listen to music like of the moment, and I try to keep up on what's happening. And so, this is probably one of my favorite tracks of the year and albums of the year. And it's Carl Lin, Lihn is the name of the artist, though his real name is Carlos Gonzalez Lin. Oh, he's an artist from Santiago, Chile. And he's the reason that the album's called K, and the song I picked is called Resurrection, which is the opening track. I think the reason why I discovered this album was because it was put out on this Atlanta-based record label called Ecodelic, which really focuses a lot on like heavy psych and like space rock, like super psychedelic music, which I really love, kind of like krautrocky sort of stuff as well. And this guy typically plays in a band called Los Tabanos Experience, which is a band that I kind of was loosely aware of, but for whatever reason never like fell in love with it. But this Carlos Gonzalez Lin is a member of that band. He's like the guitar player, and so this was his first like solo album. And it's I would definitely put it in like the modern kind of kraut rock category. And it's just like so like rich with effects. It's like this very dreamy, hazed out, stoned psych rock. And like, the vocals are very like distorted, and apparently all the vocals are like Jack Kerouac poems.
Oh, wow.
I thought it was pretty interesting.
That's, yeah.
But yeah, that first, I mean, I probably could have picked a couple tracks from that album, but that first one, it's a song that I've listened to really loud, like so many times this year, and it just like really pumps me up, and it's just, but it's also like super, like, you know, it has that motoric beat of krautrock that kind of keeps it moving, but kind of every other element is super like hazed out. So it's like this weird juxtaposition of like driving and getting you excited, but also like kind of a sedative at the same time.
Right. Yeah. No, this was another one, like totally new to me. Never heard of this guy. And I bought the album because it was like when I was listening to this, I listened to the track.
Yeah.
And I just kept listening to the album. I was like, this rules.
Yeah.
And,
really good.
And that's awesome. I didn't realize that he was from Chile. That's really cool. Like one of the things I really try to do with Foxy is make a real effort to cover music outside of like the US and Western Europe. Because that stuff just gets all, I'm not going to get into all that, but like,
oh yeah. And I feel like South America, you know, like Chile, Argentina, like, you know, there's again, like I'm pretty focused on that kind of like space rock, psychedelic, crowdy thing. So, but I feel like I discover a decent amount of bands of that ilk, like coming out of South America.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. But yeah, no, this is awesome. This is like one of the great like parts about doing this show is I learn about stuff that I didn't know that is awesome like this. And I'm glad I did it before. Like, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to like put this as somewhere on my year-end article because people definitely need to check it out. So, okay, we're in the home stretch here. The last two questions, the big questions, as I like to call them. So, first, what's the song that means the most to you? And it's not necessarily the song because of the song itself, but because you associate it with something or someone or an experience that is just like such an important thing.
Right. Yeah. So I had kind of referenced this earlier in the conversation, but when I was talking with my dad and my sister about like those songs of childhood that really, or those albums really, that really stood out, the one that is, you know, inextricably, it's so tied to my childhood. It's, you know, I just remember my dad playing it a million times and it never got old to him or to me. It was Graceland by Paul Simon. It's just such an incredible album, obviously legendary album. You know, again, I could have picked a lot of different songs from that album. But the one I picked was Homeless, with Ladysmith Black Mambazo, which I think is, I just remember that song just really like, I don't know, I just remember my dad being really obsessed with that song. And I think it felt to me like in some ways that song led my dad to, you know, want to learn more about African music. I definitely think that, you know, that filtered its way into me. And I do have like a deep love for African music, like, you know, especially the more kind of like psychedelic blues and stuff comes out of Africa, even, you know, now modern stuff that's coming out. But yeah, it's just such a powerful song. And actually another kind of reason why that song has solidified for me as being so important is that first year when we were having our Burn Paw festival at Forestry Camp, the bigger outdoor, you know, the more grandiose version of it. I remember, you know, I was so excited for it, and we brought in this like big stage, this massive sound system, and honestly, we were a little nervous about doing it. It's like the restaurant is kind of in like a neighborhood, and we were like, "Oh man, this is going to be so loud. Hope our neighbors don't hate us." But I remember they were doing like sound check, and they put this song on. It was kind of like the first song they put on when they cranked the system up.
Oh my gosh!
And it was just like I was like, oh my God, I love this song and it sounds so amazing. And it was like such a kind of a big moment, it felt like for me and for the business.
Yeah.
And then the next year, we used the same company to do like sound and like that we rent the stage from and everything. And they put that song on again during sound check. And I was like, I wonder if this is a thing. Like, I wonder if this is, kind of like one of those songs that sound engineers play,
Right.
like, that has a certain sound that helps you really dial in. I don't know, but, it had to be from Graceland. And that was like that other album that my sister was like, you gotta either pick the Nylons or Paul Simon, right. Graceland. She knew instantly,
Yeah.
I guess it probably weighed in a little bit that my dad was visiting at the time that I was thinking about these answers, but it will be, when my dad is gone, that album will always, make me remember him, and very fondly. So yeah, kind of
I love
that emotion to it as well.
Yeah. It's such an unbelievable piece of music.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I love it. And I'm trying to imagine like hearing it though, like on this huge sound system. That's got to be like this otherworldly experience. That's amazing.
Really is.
All right, well, we've come to the end here. What, at least as of this moment, what is your favorite song?
Woo! Yeah. Obviously, like, and it's impossible to pick one. So many people in my line of work ask me what my favorite beer is, and I'm also like, I can't. There's no way I can pick one. But for the sake of this, this exercise, I definitely could have picked the CCR song, "You Put a Spell on Me." I could have picked that. I love that one too. And then I considered picking a talk song, but I know that band has come up a bunch of times on the podcast already for good reason.
Yeah.
I love that band so much as well. But I ended up going with "Tango in the Night" by Fleetwood Mac.
Hell yes.
Oddly enough, this album by Fleetwood Mac is one that I kind of feel like I discovered pretty late in life. I think other albums of theirs are just much more like mainstream. And this album was one that, I don't know, obviously the cover, it's like one of my favorite album covers of all time. And the cover intrigued me. And, I honestly it's one of those bands that I haven't put deep effort into knowing. But yeah, for whatever reason, I remember probably only like 5 years ago or something, I was like, I'm going to really listen to this Fleetwood Mac album, and just being totally blown away by it, feeling like it had this kind of like darkness, the tinges of darkness to it at times that I resonated with. It had like kind of more like synthy vibes going on, which I've always really resonated with. And this particular song, every time I hear it, I just am filled with joy and excitement. And
right.
I feel like in a similar way as kind of how I described Put a Spell on Me, like the structure of the song is one that I really love in music. Like it has these kind of these kind of builds, and it has this more like jammy part of it, like if there was anything that I don't like about this song, it's that it ends way too soon. Like, I wish they could have extended that jam at the end of the song for like another 10 minutes, and I would have...
Right, yeah, it's like, give me the 20-minute version, guys. I know it's out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm pretty sure, if I remember right, like this song originated, it was Lindsay and Peter Green just jamming
Right.
is how this song started,
Yeah.
and which I think comes through. In a recent episode, the one with Natasha Pickowicz, she makes this really good point about how you can learn a lot about a person by, like, Fleetwood Mac is this sort of pick your fighter band.
Right.
You can learn a lot by who their favorite member is. And
Right.
so are you a Lindsay guy, or do you?
Well, like I said, I feel like I'm not prepared to answer that question.
Fair enough.
I guess I should be embarrassed by that, but for whatever reason, I don't know. It's not one of those bands that I've put as much effort into as I probably should. I think I did listen to that podcast, and I did think her answer was really compelling, and it definitely made me want to, like, listen to more of his song and stuff.
It is, because he's unhinged. Like,
Right.
there's this unhinged aspect. I could listen to Stevie Nicks sing a fucking phone book, and I would, like, there's this video. It's like she's getting her hair done, like, before show, like, just warming up her voice, and she starts singing Wild Heart, and it's like there's no audience. She's just, somebody's filming it for some whatever reason.
Right.
And it's like one of the most astonishing things. It's like, it's her sitting in a chair getting her hair done, singing the most perfect. It's just, anyway.
Yeah.
But all that said, Lindsay, like, I'm a Lindsay guy because I think he's
sure. Yeah, no,
bananas.
that's awesome, and I'm definitely hearing that. I'm like, yep, I got to put more time into that for sure. But yeah, I mean, honestly, I almost picked the song "Isn't It Midnight" on that album, which also I'm obsessed with. I feel like that song, in some ways, feels like a bit of an outlier on that album. It feels almost like post-punk or shoegazy, which are genres that I love.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I went with Tango in the Night because I just feel like it's more like ecstatic. It's more, it makes me faded when I hear it. I just love the jam part of it.
Yeah.
It's just a great song.
I can't argue. I love that you picked this because, yeah, most of the time when Fleetwood Mac comes up, it's like something from, like, the first album or Rumors or Tusk.
Right. Yeah.
But I think, like, this, yeah, I don't know. Tango in the Night it's a weird, fun, good time.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this was an absolute blast. Thanks again for taking the time, for putting yourself through it to come up with answers.
Oh man, it was really, really fun. Obviously I love talking about music, thinking about music. And yeah, like I said, it was initially, it kind of frightened me, but, like, putting the work in and thinking it through ended up being very rewarding. So I'm super thankful that you asked me.
Awesome. And Ceremony of Seasons, so the Meg Mulhern album is the next one, yes?
Yeah, Meg Mulhern's the next one. It's technically not going to be released to the public until early February, but the way I've kind of organized the wine club is the releases fall on the solstice or the equinox.
Nice.
So anybody that's in the wine club gets the record on December 21st. So you get kind of like a preview of it before anyone else. And then we're also going to have, like, a release event where Meg is going to perform on that same day, and we'll probably offer the record to people that are there at that point as well. But check it out. It's on Bandcamp right now. Just the first track is available, and releasing the rest of the record on, I want to say it's like February 2nd or 3rd or something like that.
Yeah, I think the 3rd is the Friday, if I remember right. And is the wine club only available in North Carolina? Is it?
We have we can legally ship to about 12 or 15, I forget exactly, states. A lot of states don't allow for the shipping of alcohol, but yeah, or not that they don't allow, but we don't necessarily have, like, all the proper permitting for all.
Right.
So yeah, there are a decent amount of states that we can ship to. So, go to check out burialbeer.com. It lists the states on there in the kind of frequently asked questions on the shipping area. And yeah, if you're interested, but you're in a place where you can't get it, reach out to me. And we'll see if we can work something out. It's just Tim at burialbeer.com is my email. So love to hear from you.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks again. This is a blast.
Thanks, Brad.
Once again, huge thanks to Tim Gormley for being so game and just like dealing with all the issues that we had to get the episode recorded and just being a fucking great guest. God, we had such a good time. I love when that happens. And yeah, I like now I'm just like, I gotta go to North Carolina and like hang out with Tim and play a show or something. Check out there's a link to, of course, in the show notes to a playlist of all of his picks. You should check that out because there's some damn good stuff in there. You'll find something you love. And go to Ceremonious Seasons, ceremoniousseasons.bandcamp.com. Check out anything that he's released. The newest one, again, Meg Mulhern's Let It Burn Through the Night, is a really beautiful album. Really, really recommend it. All of Meg's stuff's great. Hope to have her on the Foxy Digitalis podcast soon. And yeah, and if you're in the like burial visuals distribution area and you enjoy a libation every now and again, that might be something to check out. Everything I've ever had from burial, and it's all really good stuff. I'm no expert, but man, it's killer stuff. And it just looks so cool. And I'm sorry, but that counts for something, at least for me. So anyway, thank you all for being here. You know where to find me on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky. Just look for Foxy Digitalis. You can join the Patreon for $5 a month. Patreon.com/Foxy Digitalis. You get the episodes early and you get a whole exclusive Patreon section with extra questions and hilarity. I don't know. It's always kind of wild over in that section. But hey, if that's not for you, take that $5 a month and go support, one of the releases on Ceremonious Seasons or something like that. Just support artists and people doing cool stuff. Otherwise, hope you're well. Hope everything's good. I don't know. But whatever you're doing, until next time, keep listening to whatever the hell you want.